Welcome to Chatting GPT, the podcast where I get to meet other humans who are implementing AI. Today, I have the great pleasure to have Beau Warren with me. Beau is our Copilot course creator, but in another life, he's also a systems analyst and IT guy at The Panel, which is a really go-getting recruitment firm based in Dublin. He looks after 21 people in the panel and he looks after me with all of my Copilot questions. And I just decided today would be a great time to invite him on and we'll have a chat about the whole state of Copilot. So you're very welcome to the show, Beau.
Hi, Maryrose, thank you.
So let us go back to a year ago. 1 year ago, I was feeling very excited about the rollout of Copilot because the magic that was sold to me, or maybe sold to myself in my own head, was it's going to be able to connect with all my files and it's an AI. So I had envisaged this kind of like Chat GPT like power sitting on top of my files. And unfortunately, that's not my experience so far. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things it can do is you can use it basically like a supercharged search. We've all had issues where you struggle to find things, whether it's emails, messages, whatever. And so the biggest thing as far as it using all of your files is just to be able to find where you're at with things or whether you're organizing meetings based on a bunch of files and things like that. As far as it's thing like ChatGPT, when you talk to using the files. Sort of. You've got to be a bit more particular than that. You can do those sorts of things, but you've got to go and set up things like agents with what you've got. So you can do that to set up chatbots based on whatever documentation you've got and things like that.
I was wondering how long the agents it would take for the agents to
Yeah.
come up, and that was fairly quick now, Beau, fairly quick indeed.
Yeah.
So let's explain first of all to everyone listening what the promise of an agent is, and then from that is one thing I really feel like Microsoft is quite advanced in terms of its offer. So if you could just describe what they have.
So agents are probably the best way to think of it is they're a bit of a sort of specialized GPT made with whatever you've given it.
Anyone, sorry, GPT is basically where you've trained the model on your own data, your own files, your own way of doing things, and it sits on top of the model. So it's a place where you can go and have your own knowledge base to do your searches. So back to you, Beau.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is probably I see it used for a lot of I know law firms use it for, checking out case studies, things like that. You feed it a whole bunch of legal precedent and then go and ask it about things. Or I've seen other ones where you might use as internal documentation. If you're the sort of company that's got a gigantic manual of everything, feed that into your agent, and then now you've got a chatbot that people can come and get support from.
But to me, that sounds like a GPT. Like, from my understanding of an agent, and I'm actually on the record of saying this, I think there's a lot of misuse of the term. So, to me, an agent is where I can set something up with a task and it will go off and do that task without me having to do anything to make it happen. Now, I'm quite excited about deep research from Gemini, deep research from OpenAI, because to me, that's a step in the right direction of an agent. You give it a task, I want to research something, give it a bit of background info, and it'll go off and it might come back to you 40 minutes later with an answer.
No, I agree. I believe there are ideas like that behind it. I've never experienced it myself.
On
I tend to
Copilot.
sort of, yeah, I believe that there are, if there's not in there now, there are plans for this. That's the promise I've seen from their material about it. But I think in the end, they've sort of combined them into the same thing.
So, have you had any experience with like Salesforce? Because Salesforce are also big upping themselves on the whole agents front.
I do not. I mean, I work in recruitment with a program called Bullhorn. Now, they're working towards things like that. They can basically automate entire sections of the recruitment life cycle.
Yes, it's a big race, the race to agents, and
It is
I think
definitely.
2025 we're gonna get agents literally in a couple of months.
I think so. I mean, it's the whole AI thing has been what nothing more than maybe 3 years ago. And
I
now
know.
here we are with AI, completely taking over parts of the process that used to take people days, weeks, months.
Yes. Well, Gen AI is new, obviously, but AI has been around for quite some time.
Exactly.
Yes. So going back to Copilot, So my big hope was that it was going to give me like all power and glory. And when I saw the price tag, I thought, God, it's definitely going to give me this. It's so expensive, and I have to pay in advance
Yeah.
yearly without even getting to use it. So I paid my money, and I really use it like a kind of a very fast file explorer.
So I think that's the one big thing. I mean, one thing about making agents with it is that you do get to keep all of your data within your own tenant. So obviously, one of the biggest fears with AI is what should and shouldn't you be feeding into it. Whereas if you can do all that within your own tenant, there's no fear of it getting out anywhere.
So what I'm hearing then as a big plus then for Copilot is GPTs and generally knowledge bases. So what's it called on Copilot when where the agents slash assistants are?
It's in a thing called Studio. I think they've now
Oh yeah,
started calling it Agent Studio, which is the part of the sort of the Copilot page where you go and do it.
because it's kind of sexy. Agent
Yeah,
Studio.
exactly.
Okay, well, I will definitely go and have a look at that. So, going back to the amazing masterclasses that you deliver for us, one of the things I remember the most was that you're the most passionate about what Copilot can do within teams. And I would love you to share your top three or five things about Copilot and Teams.
So probably my number one thing is that every week I host sort of a training internally on whatever topic we're going to cover. By using Copilot in Teams means that I can first generate something like an agent from the transcript. So I just have to deliver the training, and then I can
Hmm.
come back to Copilot afterwards and basically have it turn that training into my written documentation to cover the training. So then half an hour later, instead of having to sit down and write down all the things we went over, I just ask it what was covered, put it into this format, put an email, off it goes.
Okay. So I have a lot of meetings and stuff on like
Yeah.
I'm not using it as I should. So now I just go in. So do I go into Copilot and say get the transcript from yesterday, turn it into an email, or do I go into Teams?
You go into the appointment in Teams, there's a Copilot button at the top. Believe it's hidden away behind the recap button.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the other thing on meetings is you can also prepare for meetings if you're the sort of person that very diligently fills in descriptions for meetings and things like that,
I do.
which I'm sure you're a very organized person, so I'm sure you do, then you can go through and ask it to help you prepare for meetings. If it knows what the meeting's about and it
Oh.
knows all the files that you've got that are related to that meeting, it can help you then prepare for it. So you'll need to have this ready, you'll need to have that ready. They're likely to ask you about this.
So, for example, if I was preparing for a another podcast, would I go into my calendar then and do it from there, or do I go into Copilot app?
So you go into the Copilot app, and at the bottom that you can press the slash button to pick events, people, whatever you want the subject to be that you're basing the prompt around. So then you go
Yeah.
and find your event, and then you would just say, "But help me prepare for it." And if you filled in all the description and everything, it will go off and do that for you. So say if you go on an upcoming podcast, you might say to it, "Help me prepare for this podcast that we're doing, and give me a couple of questions that would be good to ask."
Okay, that's good. I'm looking at it right now. However, I'm only seeing my retrospective meetings. Basically, that's where I'm going to go and have a look. Say, for example, like Beau is coming to talk about Copilot, and then it's going to go off to its iteration of ChatGPT, right?
Hmm.
Now,
Basically, yeah.
question: when I first started exploring Copilot, it was back in the very, very early days, and it was when we were like 3.5 and 4.
Yeah.
So, with its deal with OpenAI, does Microsoft get to get every update? And am I getting that through Copilot?
So they're a bit cagey about it. I believe the answer is yes, and that it's currently running on GPT-4o.
Oh, yeah.
That can depend on a couple of things. I think sometimes, depending on what you're asking, it might fall back to the other models. So the important thing to remember about is that it's not exactly the same as talking to ChatGPT. Like if you give both of them the same prompt, you'll get slightly different answers. It's using the same model, but with different parameters and such around it.
Okay, right. And then also, you don't have the whole reasoning models either, which I think
No.
are very exciting.
One of the things that I do miss coming from ChatGPT to Copilot is the part where you can give it the persona, or whatever that section is called, where you can say, always use British English and you tell it who you are and
Yes.
all these things. That part is probably missing from Copilot. I think, especially when it comes to using it in Outlook, would probably help. I sort of envisioned an area where you
Hmm.
would sit there running off all your emails and it would sort of learn to talk like you. which
Yes.
it really doesn't do that at the moment. You still get the typical, I hope this email finds you well,
And
which
that's a
just,
top-notch answer,
it's,
huh?
it's like pulling out what little hair I have.
So hang on, we're a couple of minutes in, and Beau has actually said one thing he's kind of not really very happy about because normally he's super, super positive about everything Copilot related. So I really like those two examples. Is there anything else in Teams that I should be looking at that maybe I'm not?
Um, I'd say they're probably the two biggest things
Hmm.
is dealing with your previous meetings. You know, instead of having someone having to take notes and refer back to it, you can say, right, what was covered. Probably the last big thing would be, say you've got a very big meeting and there's people running late or whatever. It's always very
Hmm.
disruptive if the meeting starts and someone comes up 10 minutes later and has to be brought up to speed on what's happening. If Copilot is already going, you can have it in the meeting and just come along and ask Copilot, what have I missed so far? And it'll give you a 5-line recap of what you missed.
I remember when you were demoing that in the
Yeah,
masterclass. That was very powerful, actually. That's really cool.
yeah,
And then the other thing I remember as well was something to do with, if you're managing several direct reports,
yeah.
can't you use it to kind of like summarize their meetings and just keep an eye that they're doing what they should be doing?
You can, so you can ask it sort of in general if there are other meetings that you have vision of. Say you were invited to the meeting but you weren't there, but
Mm,
you've got access to the transcript. You could ask it what was talked about in the meeting that you didn't even attend. As long as
yeah.
you were invited to it, and you can see the transcript for that meeting.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we're very much working on evolving is this idea of like new meetings etiquette.
Yeah,
So, now that we have EU AI Act in place, yay, I'm very happy about that. That we always must say that there is a meeting note taker.
yeah.
And just even speaking to the note taker and saying, like, this is Mary Rose's voice and this is Beau.
In Microsoft, there it has a little pop up at the top that'll tell you that there's a transcript being recorded and stuff. I don't believe it will tell you that Copilot is doing anything with it. I haven't noticed it say that. I'm pretty sure it just tells you that the meeting is being recorded and transcribed.
But here's the thing, though. Can you set it so that one of the things I'm really advocating is that people set their note takers so that they don't show up at meetings that they're not attending?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily run as a note taker. Like, when you would use something like Fathom or Otter, it's got to sit there as another person in the meeting.
Mm.
Copilot doesn't quite work like that. Copilot's just monitoring the transcript of the meeting. So it sort of runs inside Teams and is just monitoring that transcript as it's being written. It doesn't sit there as another person in the meeting recording the meeting. Recordings and transcripts have been a thing in Teams for a long, long time.
Forever.
It
Is,
just works off that.
so is it possible to turn off transcripts? So are you saying then that
Yes,
like
of
every
course.
single meeting,
Yeah.
is it? Okay. How do
Yeah,
you
you
do
can
that?
you can set it default on or off. Depending on how you got your settings up, there should just be a button at the top where it'll be. Uh, Sometimes there's just a record and transcribe button. Sometimes it's hidden away in the settings menu for the call.
Okay, right. Interesting.
It depends. It depends on what Microsoft has updated this week.
Teams is obviously a winner for Copilot. What's the next best then? Are we looking at Outlook? Are we looking at Word, Excel,
So
PowerPoint?
probably the one where I use it most would probably be Outlook. I'm sure everyone's been in the situation where there's people having a great big long email conversation, and then suddenly you get CC'd in right at the end, and you sit there and go, "What the hell is going on here?" With Copilot, there's just a summarize button at the top in Outlook. You just click summarize, and it basically just gives you one line for each email to say what
Oh,
happened. It'll say
lovely.
this person asked this person answered, this person said this, blah blah blah, and then you get to the end, and then you're caught up on the whole thing instead of having to scroll through. Scrolling through emails is terrible.
Yes, we do not want to be doing that as super powered
That is a
humans.
huge waste of time.
Definitely not. So basically, that's a really good one. And then Word, Excel, PowerPoint,
So
anything
with
particularly striking
Excel
there?
was one that I really like. Basically, the idea is that instead of having to memorize all the formulas and how to do these things, you can basically ask Copilot to but either give you a formula. You open up the spreadsheet that you're working with and say, help me figure out, it can give you insights into it. It can generate sort of a little dashboard. It can help you manipulate the data to help you order it, change it, give color coding to it, any sorts of things like that. It can help you with making the formula.
Is
And
this
it's
in a
sort of
chat window? Is this in a
so
chatbot
this is
window it's doing
yeah,
it?
so it comes up, you can have a little sidebar with it.
Okay, and then the benefit, obviously, of staying within your own company Excel is that you're not having to do the whole redacting of information before you put it
Exactly,
out
exactly. You
onto
can work
others.
with your actual data where you keep it anyway,
I like
and
that.
and
I
it's all
like that
fine.
promise.
Yeah. I think for companies, that's the biggest thing. Like if you've already decided that SharePoint's the safe place to keep your information, then you're not risking anything by having Copilot do anything with it.
That's true. Now, moving on to companies.
Hmm.
The biggest problem that's holding back many of the companies that we're dealing with is this whole business of if your data structure isn't set up so that your private and your company are separate. Can you explain this, first of all, to laymen and women?
So the way Copilot works with files is it can see anything that you, the logged in user, can see. It can't see everything in the company. The issue that big companies have is that they're not always completely locked down on whether people have access to the right things. So, I've heard stories of people finding out about other people's salary information
I've heard that
because
too.
through whatever chain they've had access to it. They didn't even know they had access to it. They've just gone and asked Copilot. Copilot's found it. No, and it's not because the company has that information. It's because the person had access to that information that they shouldn't have had.
So, for example, if you think of a company and let's say on payday, everybody gets an email with the confirmation of their payslip issued by some sort of payroll software. So, every single person has that. So, if I then get Copilot in, can I literally just look up everyone's salary just
No,
easily like
not
that?
quite. So because that's been emailed to each person could ask their Copilot about their own email about that. They wouldn't see everyone else's. But say you're a company that's just got everything on one big SharePoint, sorry, just everything's dumped in there with no access list or anything like that. Then that's where you start to get problems. Accounts and payroll just has a folder on the company SharePoint that everyone actually has access to, but most people ignore it. Your Copilot can see that because you've got access to it. So the big issue for a lot of big companies is managing that, making sure that their access is completely locked down, that only the right people have the right access to the right thing. And it's the sort of thing they all say they're doing it, and then once it actually gets tested, they get scared.
Yes, exactly. I could not imagine the nightmare facing people who have masses of folders
Oh,
and
exactly.
teams.
It's a huge data governance issue.
Yes, exactly. So, in terms of Microsoft, they need to help businesses to become data ready.
But the biggest part of it is, there's obviously huge spend associated with doing these sorts of projects.
But there's a huge spend. Like, say, for example, if you thought of like 500 staff. So, 500 staff times the Copilot licenses is quite a chunk of change.
It is, yeah.
Uh,
I remember when they first brought it out, it was going to be for more than 300 licenses to be eligible for Copilot, and then they sort of realized no one was signing up for it. When really, to me, it's the smaller companies that stand to benefit more. It's the smaller companies that are more equipped to do a faster rollout.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. They should have started the other way around.
So luckily they changed that.
Well, luckily, yeah, but instead, when we were doing our research for Crossing the Chasm, great report available on our website. It's looking at UK and Irish companies and how they're going about how they're implementing AI. Every single company we spoke to in Ireland was doing an Copilot pilot. And when I went back afterwards and I was going, well, did you roll beyond the pilot? And there wasn't as much love for Copilot in the autumn as there was in the summer.
Hmm. The
Oh,
readiness report is just a licensing thing to check that so Microsoft licensing to big companies is the Wild West. It's
yes.
madness. There are people whose sole job is to deal with licensing. But their readiness checker checks the licensing type that you have basically and tells you have, 4,500 people eligible for it.
And it's only just about sales. Actually, that
Yeah.
was another thing that came up in the research that we did for the Crossing the Chasm. People were saying, like, we're doing a pilot. And I was like, great. And then the next thing they were saying, and we got some training from Microsoft. And I was like, oh, interesting. Thinking
Yeah.
of us and our masterclass, it couldn't possibly be as good as our masterclass. And then mostly the next thing people said was, yeah, they sent two people out and all they were interested in was what kind of user licenses we've got.
Yeah.
There was no demos of the kind of cool things that you show in our masterclass, like of this is how you can power it as a user.
They do actually have some. I was looking today at. They have a sort of 6 week Copilot readiness course, which is it's a packet of information for businesses. It's a sort of one prompt a day for 6 weeks kind of thing. There's a fair bit of sort of self-taught information, but as far as direct training, not really. Microsoft tends to rely on their Learn website.
Massive.
Yeah,
They're massive training companies. So
yeah.
it's a 6 weeks Copilot readiness course. So in other words,
So it's like a Copilot primer that goes through. A lot of it is using just the Copilot chat. It's a lot. of make one thing and then go and talk to the chatbot about it, which is what you do with it. And then I think the last 2 weeks it covers agents, and then in week 6 is sort of a bit of a mini project thing where you're hopping between apps to do to design a menu or something like that. It is called the Great Microsoft 365 Copilot Journey
Woo!
is what they're calling it. So it's supposed to be for companies that have rolled out Copilot and are struggling with staff uptake of it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. That's the barriers I see to it are price, having to pay up front. 2
Yeah,
is your data ready, the privacy thing.
yeah,
3 is the do you use it once you get it? And then 4, which would be very close to my heart, is that, what I found from my own use of it is that the answers it gives me are very perfunctory. And it's
yeah.
not a word I use lightly, but like I usually go, oh, I need to get something beautiful. So I'll go over to Claude, or increasingly I'm going on to Perplexity or One because that just really nails it.
So I find Copilot very good for things that you normally Google. So you want to say, tell me how to do this. It'll give you, a list of instructions. Perfect.
Yeah.
It's not the most creative tool. It's definitely set up to be sort of business focused.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is when I'm thinking about, say, our core course, you've got content creation, we're not going to use Copilot. We've got knowledge bases, we are going to use
Yeah,
Copilot, and we're going to
definitely.
call them agents and feel like
Yeah,
we're really, really cool. Then we have data analysis. Copilot's a winner
yeah,
there because you're going to use all your data and you don't have to be doing the
yeah.
redacting. You've got your ethics. And yeah, you haven't got your customization where you can tell it what kind of language and what kind of person you are. So Microsoft, bring that on and you'll be winning.
But where you can say you've made a Word document, which is a gigantic, say it's for a presentation or something, and then you go to PowerPoint and just say, use this Word document, make me a presentation based on it. And it'll give you the presentation with the speaker notes and things like that. So you can sort of do a lot of, if you've done your first bit of work, which is say writing your report, and then you got to present it, you can get that presentation ready really quickly.
So content repurposing. That's actually interesting because it's content repurposing within the Microsoft world
Yeah,
as opposed to from website to YouTube to
yeah,
X other places. I've definitely got a few little use cases I'm going to go off and practice on my own Copilot.
yeah.
I wonder if I can sign up for the great 6 week readiness I've
So
got
it's not even a
Copilot.
side thing. It's free.
Oh,
It's just
great.
it's a training pack that's available.
As I'm a constant learner, I think I will do that and I will let you know how I get on.
You should definitely do the one prompt a day that they have.
Beau, you've been brilliant. This has been really insightful. I'm sure anyone who's sitting there with a Copilot license that's a little underutilized will probably find they've got loads of things they can put into practice now, thanks to you. So, we will be running another Copilot Masterclass very soon. We're going to put a link to the course in the show notes, and you will have Beau in your screens showing you all the really cool hacks that he has worked out. So, thank you very much, Beau Warren, for joining us this evening.
Just thank you very much.